Hello and welcome to Read to Me, Matt Dunn. Here I shall read to you. Chapter 4, Part 2. Nothing could equal my delight on seeing Clerval. His presence brought back to my thoughts my father, Elizabeth, and all those scenes of home so dear to my recollection. I grasped his hand, and in a moment forgot my horror and misfortune. I felt suddenly, and for the first time during many months, calm and serene joy. I welcomed my friend, therefore, in the most cordial manner, and we walked toward my college. Clerval continued talking for some time about our mutual friends and his own good fortune in being permitted to come to Ingolstadt. "You may easily believe," he said, "how great was the difficulty to persuade my father that it was not absolutely necessary for a merchant not to understand anything except bookkeeping, and indeed I believe I left him incredulous to the last, for his constant answer to my unwearied entreaties was the same as that of the Dutch schoolmaster in the Vicar of Wakefield. I have 10,000 florins a year without Greek. I eat heartily without Greek, but his affection for me at length overcame his dislike of learning, and he has permitted me to undertake a voyage of discovery to the land of knowledge. It gives me the greatest delight to see you. But tell me how you left my father, brothers, and Elizabeth." "Very well, and very happy. Only a little uneasy that they hear from you so seldom. By the by, I mean to lecture you a little upon their accounts myself. But my dear Frankenstein," continued he, stopping short and gazing full into his face, "I did not before remark how very ill you appear, so thin and pale. You look as if you had been watching for several nights." "You have guessed right. I have lately been so deeply engaged in one occupation that I have not allowed myself sufficient rest. As you see. But I sincerely hope, that all these employments are now at an end, and that I am at full length free." I trembled excessively. I could not endure to think of, and far less to allude to the occurrence of the preceding night. I walked with a quick pace, and we soon arrived at my college. I then reflected, and the thought made me shiver, that the creature who I had left in my apartment might still be there, alive and walking about. Man, I mean, that's fucked up. Like, you fucking just you brought this thing back to life and you just left it. Him or her. What is it? Does it have a gender if it's just a corpse brought back to life? I mean, if it had parts, what parts? Huh. Maybe it has a male's mind, you know? I dreaded to behold this monster, but I feared still more that Henry should see him. Entreating him, therefore, to remain a few minutes at the bottom of the stairs, I darted up toward my own room. My hands was already on the lock of the door before I recollected myself. I then paused, and a cold shivering came over me. I threw the door forcefully open, as children are accustomed to do when they expect a specter to stand in the inn waiting for them at the other side, but nothing appeared. I stepped fearfully in. The apartment was empty, and my bedroom was also freed from its hideous guest. I could hardly believe that so great a good fortune could have befallen me, but when I became assured that my enemy had indeed fled, I clapped my hands for joy and ran down to Clairvaux. We ascended into my room, and the servant presently brought breakfast. But I was unable to contain myself. It was not joy only that possessed me. I felt my flesh tingle with excess of sensitivity, and my pulse beat rapidly. I was unable to remain for a single instant in the same place. I jumped over the chairs and clapped my hands and laughed aloud. Clairvaux at first attributed my unusual spirit to joy on his arrival. But when he observed me more attentively, he saw a wildness in my eyes for which he could not account, and my loud, unrestrained, heartless laughter frightened him and astonished him. "My dear Victor," cried he, "what, for God's sakes, is the matter? Do not laugh in that manner. How ill are you are? How ill you are! What is the cause of all this?" "Do not ask me," cried I, putting my hands before my eyes, for I thought I saw the dreaded spectre glide into the room. "He can tell. Oh, save me! Save me!" I imagined that the monster seized me. I struggled furiously and fell down into a fit. Poor Clairvaux, what must have been his feelings? A meeting which he anticipated with such joy, so strangely turned to bitterness. But I was not the witness of his grief, for I was lifeless and did not recover my senses for a long, long time. This was the commencement of a nervous fever, which confined me for several months. During all that time, Henry was my only nurse. I afterward learned that, knowing my father's advanced age and unfitness for so long a journey, and how wretched my sickness would make Elizabeth, he spared them this grief by concealing the extent of my disorder. He knew that I could not have been more kind and attentive nurse than himself, and, firm in the hope that he felt of my recovery, he did not doubt that instead of doing harm, he performed the kindest action that he could toward them. By lying to them, I guess. But I was, in reality, very ill. In reality. And surely nothing but the unbounded and unremitting attentions of my friend could have restored me to life. The form of the monster on whom I had bestowed existence was forever before my eyes, and I raved incessantly concerning him. Doubtless my words surprised Henry. He at first believed them to be the wanderings of my disturbed imagination, but the pertinacity with which I continually recurred to the same subject persuaded him that my disorder indeed owed its origins to some uncommon and terrible event. Woo! Boy, are we almost done with this chapter. By very slow degrees, and with frequent relapses that alarmed and grieved my friend, I recovered. I remembered the first time I became capable of observing outward objects with any kind of pleasure. I perceived that the fallen leaves had disappeared and that the young buds were shooting forth from the trees that shaded my window. It was a divine spring, and the season contributed greatly to my convalescence. I felt also sentiments of joy and affection revive in my bosom. My gloom disappeared, and in the short time I became as cheerful as before I was attacked by the fatal passion. "Dearest Clerval, exclaimed I. How kind, how very good you are to me. This whole winter, instead of being spent in study, as you promised yourself, had been consumed in my sick room. How shall I ever repay you? I feel the greatest remorse for this disappointment of which I have been the occasion, but you will forgive me. You will repay me entirely if you do not decompose yourself, but get well as fast as you can, and since you appear in such good spirit, I may speak to you on one subject. May I not? I trembled. One subject. What could it be? Could he allude to an object on whom I dared not even think? Compose yourself, said Clerval, who observed my change of color. I will not mention it if it agitates you, but your father and cousin would be very happy if they received a letter from you in your own handwriting. They hardly know how ill you have been and are uneasy at your long silence. Is that all, my dear Henry? How could you suppose that my first thought would not fly toward those dear, dear friends, whom I love and who are so deserving of my love? If this is your present temper, my friend, you will perhaps be glad to see a letter that has been lying here some days for you. It is from your cousin, I believe. Wow. A young Victor Frankenstein has a letter from his cousin, aka his wife. Times were different back then in different countries and other places and other times. Interesting. Whatever happened to that monster? Anyway, feel free to like and subscribe, please. It helps me, helps you. Comment down below, good, bad. Give it to me. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the book. I will a lot.